Freddie Mercury was a rock god, a force of nature with a voice that could command stadiums and a stage presence that made him seem utterly invincible. But in his final years, that godlike icon vanished, replaced by a reclusive, frail figure hiding from the world. For decades, the full story of his last days was a closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of loyal friends who watched him fight a battle he could not win.
He had a very responsible attitude to everyone that he was close to, and he was a very generous and caring person to all of the people that came through his life.
This is the untold story of his final recordings, a desperate race against time fueled by a devastating diagnosis he was determined to hide. It is a story that reveals the shocking truth of the price he paid to protect his legacy. To truly understand the courage behind that secret, it is essential to first explore the shy, conflicted man who built the legend. The making of a legend. To understand the King of Queen, you must first meet the boy who felt like an outcast. He was born Farrokh Bulsara in 1946 in distant Zanzibar, a shy and awkward child of Parsi heritage with famously protruding teeth that made him self-conscious his entire life. Sent to a British-style boarding school in India at age 8, he spent his formative years thousands of miles from his family, feeling like he never quite belonged. It was there he found solace in music, learning piano with an uncanny ability to replicate songs by ear. He even formed his first band, the Hectics, covering Western rock and roll hits. But the feeling of being an outsider, a colonial boy in a British system, would follow him for the rest of his life. When his family fled a violent revolution in Zanzibar and settled in the quiet, grey London suburb of Feltham, the disconnect between his quiet home life and his massive ambitions grew even wider. The exotic world of his birth was replaced by the mundane reality of semi-detached houses under the Heathrow flight path. The flamboyant rock god the world would come to know was not born. He was meticulously designed as a suit of armor for the shy boy who felt he'd never fit in. He enrolled at Ealing Art College, a legendary crucible of British rock talent that included the likes of Pete Townshend and Ronnie Wood. In this bohemian scene of late 1960s London, he finally found his tribe. He met guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor, two brilliant musicians in a band called Smile. Farrokh saw their potential, but felt they lacked the vision and the audacity to become true stars. He became their most ardent fan, attending all their shows, offering unsolicited advice on showmanship and direction. When Smile's original singer quit, Farrokh pushed, he cajoled, and he willed his way into the group. One of the first things he did was change his own name to Freddie Mercury, a name that evoked power, mystique, and a connection to the gods. Then he changed the band's name to Queen. It was theatrical, audacious, and, as he put it, splendidly regal. Against his bandmates' reservations, he insisted it was a name people would remember. It was a declaration of intent. From the very beginning, Freddie was not just a singer. He was the architect of his own mythology, a man determined to control every aspect of his public identity. Their rise was meteoric, but hard-won. With the addition of the quiet, steady bassist John Deacon, Queen crafted a sound unlike any other, blending heavy rock, vaudeville, and grand opera. Their early albums were a showcase of this ambition, but it was in 1975 that their vision culminated in Bohemian Rhapsody, a 6-minute, multi-part epic that defied all commercial logic. Their record label told them it was too long to be a single and would never be played on the radio. Freddie, in an act of defiant genius, leaked the song to a DJ friend who played it 14 times in one weekend, forcing the label's hand. It became one of the greatest songs ever recorded and launched them into the stratosphere. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, they were an unstoppable force, delivering hit after hit. On stage, Freddie was a master showman, preening, powerful, and utterly in control, holding audiences of hundreds of thousands in the palm of his hand. He cultivated an image of a hedonistic, untouchable rock star living a life of wild excess. But behind the scenes, a fierce need for privacy remained. He was a man of deep contradictions, a roaring lion in the spotlight, but a quiet, almost shy man at home who guarded his personal life ferociously. This incredible journey reached its zenith on July 13, 1985, at Live Aid. In front of a global audience of nearly 2 billion people, Queen delivered a 20-minute set that is now universally regarded as the greatest live performance in rock history. Freddie, at 38 years old, was at the absolute peak of his powers, a confident, commanding, and seemingly immortal rock god. The world saw a man on top of the world, a flawless icon at the height of his fame. No one could have known that this triumphant moment was the last time the world would see him so vibrant. It was the peak, just before the fall. A devastating secret was about to take root, one that would soon threaten to destroy everything he had built. A secret in the spotlight. In the wake of Live Aid, Queen was reborn. They were, without question, the biggest band on the planet, and Freddie Mercury was their king. He seemed immortal, a cultural icon whose energy and charisma knew no bounds. He was the very definition of a flawless public image, a man who had crafted his persona so perfectly that the line between the performance and the person seemed to have vanished entirely. But while the world was still cheering, his private life was about to be shattered by a diagnosis that was, at the time, considered a death sentence. Around 1987, Freddie Mercury was reportedly diagnosed with AIDS. It is impossible to overstate the terror and stigma that surrounded this disease in the 1980s. Fueled by ignorance and fear, it was not seen merely as a health crisis. It was viewed by many as a plague, a moral judgment, particularly on the gay community. The British tabloid press was especially vicious, running homophobic and sensationalist stories that destroyed lives. For a global superstar whose fame was built on an image of power and vitality, this secret was catastrophic. If the press got hold of the story, it wouldn't just mean the end of his career. It would mean the complete and utter destruction of his public legacy, turning him from a beloved icon into a pariah, his life's work reduced to a cruel punchline. The stakes could not have been higher. Freddie made a decision. He would tell almost no one. He confided in his ex-partner and closest friend, Mary Austin, and his partner at the time, Jim Hutton. Then, he gathered his bandmates and told them the truth. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon were sworn to absolute secrecy. They recall seeing the physical signs of his illness before he told them, and feeling a growing sense of dread. In that moment, Queen ceased to be just a band. They became protectors, forming a tight, impenetrable circle around their friend to shield him from the cruel judgment of the outside world. They all agreed to publicly deny any and all rumors about his health, no matter how obvious the signs became. The burden of this secret was immense, but their loyalty was absolute. They would lie to the press, to their friends, and to their families, all to give Freddie the privacy he so desperately needed. And what Freddie did with that privacy is the most shocking and courageous part of his story. He did not retreat to a quiet life to manage his illness. He did the exact opposite. He turned to the one place he had always felt safe, the recording studio. As his health began to decline, he developed a frantic, almost obsessive need to create music. The studio in Montreux, Switzerland, became his sanctuary, a place where he wasn't a sick man, but simply a singer. He told the band, "Write me anything. Just write me stuff. I will sing it. I will leave you as much as I possibly can." And so they worked. To foster unity and speed, the band decided to credit every new song to Queen, eliminating any individual ego from the process. It was all for Freddie. Through the sessions for their final albums, The Miracle and Innuendo, Freddie poured every last ounce of his fading energy into his music. He was literally singing for his life, recording a final testament that he knew he would never get to perform. Brian May would write complex, powerful melodies, often worrying they were too demanding for Freddie's weakening voice. But time and again, Freddie would arrive at the studio, often frail and barely able to walk, and deliver vocal performances that were among the most powerful of his career. He was a man possessed by a single mission: to leave a vault of music behind for his fans. The world wondered why he had disappeared. The truth was, he was working harder than ever, in a desperate, defiant race against the clock. The show must go on. As Queen continued to release new music, the man behind the voice was fading away. The public fallout from his secret illness began as a whisper and grew into a roar, fueled by the relentless, cruel machine of the British tabloid press. They became obsessed with his gaunt appearance and his retreat from the public eye. His home in London, Garden Lodge, was placed under a virtual siege by paparazzi. Long lens shots of a shockingly thin Freddie walking in his garden were splashed across front pages with brutal headlines speculating on his health. Every trip to a doctor was documented, every public sighting analyzed with a ghoulish fascination. This constant hounding forced him further into isolation, turning his home into both a sanctuary and a prison. His final appearance in a music video for the song "These Are the Days of Our Lives" was a ghostly and heartbreaking farewell. The band filmed it in black and white, specifically to mask the severity of his frail condition. He wore a custom-made catsuit adorned with pictures of his beloved cats to hide his dramatic weight loss. He could only stand for a few minutes at a time and had to be propped up between takes. Despite the obvious pain he was in, he delivered a performance of quiet dignity. At the very end of the song, he looked directly into the camera, a faint smile on his lips, and whispered, "I still love you." It was his goodbye to his fans, even though they didn't know it yet. This relentless media firestorm formed a dark backdrop to his last creative burst. The most powerful and defiant moment of this era came during the recording of the song, "The Show Must Go On." It was an anthem of resilience, a declaration of defiance in the face of death, with a soaring, incredibly demanding vocal line. Brian May, who wrote the song, was convinced that Freddie was physically too weak to sing it. The melody was too high, the required power too immense for a man in his condition. He presented the demo to Freddie, gently expressing his concern. Freddie's response was legendary. He brushed off the concerns, reportedly said, "I'll fucking do it, darling," took a straight shot of vodka, walked into the vocal booth, and delivered one of the most astonishing and emotionally raw performances of his entire career, nailing it in a single take. It was a staggering act of will, a man staring down his own mortality and refusing to be broken. In his final months, Freddie retreated permanently to Garden Lodge, cared for by his closest friends, Mary Austin, Jim Hutton, and a small, loyal circle. He made the conscious decision to stop taking his medication and was preparing for the end on his own terms. Yet, even then, he had one last move to make. He had spent years protecting his privacy, denying the rumors, and shielding himself from public pity. But he was determined to have the final word. On November 23, 1991, he issued a public statement, released to the world's press, finally confirming the truth. He had AIDS. He had taken control of his own narrative for the last time. It was not a plea for sympathy, but a simple, dignified statement of fact, ending years of speculation with his own words. Just over 24 hours later, Freddie Mercury died peacefully at home. He was 45 years old. The show was finally over. We began with the mystery of a global icon who vanished at the height of his fame. The shocking secret, it turns out, was not one of scandal, but of unimaginable courage. Freddie Mercury's final years were not defined by the illness that was destroying his body, but by the creative fire that it could not extinguish. He faced a death sentence not by surrendering to it, but by staring it down and daring it to stop him from creating. He transformed his private tragedy into a final, timeless artistic statement, leaving behind a body of work that stands as a testament to his unbreakable spirit. His legacy is not just one of showmanship and vocal genius, but of profound human resilience. This leads to a thought-provoking question that remains today. By hiding his illness until the very end, did Freddie Mercury perform his ultimate act of self-preservation, or did he miss a chance to use his global platform to fight the stigma of AIDS when it mattered most? There is no easy answer. What is certain is that in his final defiant act, he ensured that he would be remembered not as a victim, but as a legend. The showman left the stage, but the voice remains eternal. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next one.